The Wespener Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The First Level of Learning. Wespener.com. Present and Future Challenges, PFC, Section. Private First Class Paper Number 1, The Marduk Issue and the Earthbound Annunaki. By Wespener, Thursday, May 5, 2011. 1. Abstract. I want to start the first PFC, Present and Future Challenges, paper with a reflection of the far past hitting us in present time. First of all, I need to make the reader aware of that it's best to read the Annunaki papers before you read this one, or you will most probably be lost in the logic. Some 4,000 plus years ago, the majority of the Annunaki left Earth after had nuked the Sinai spaceport and Sodom and Gomorrah. Marduk, however, who was Ea's eldest son, stayed on Earth with some of his loyal lords. Marduk, in the past, married a human female, a crossbreed between Annunaki and Homo erectus, and was therefore forbidden to return to Nibiru. No human was allowed in heaven, although some exceptions were made on occasion, such as Enoch, but otherwise, they were only short visits. So, Marduk had to choose to either keep his hybrid wife and give up his royal status on Nibiru, or abandon his wife and keep his status. Marduk, whom already was angry with his own king Anu and his council, due to them putting Namar's bloodline before his own, more or less said, "Screw it," and kept his wife. However, he never forgot or forgave his own relatives, whom he thought had betrayed him, and he declared war against the Enlilites, the Ram clan, and now Marduk wanted to be the ruler of Earth. At least, that was better than being no king at all, he thought. So he fought a raging war against Inanna, the female Enlilite, a war which involved using humans as soldiers, dying in the thousands for the cause of two power-hungry Annunaki. When the Annunaki left the planet, Marduk's human wife was since long dead. She did not enjoy the longevity of the gods, but King Anu and the council did not want Marduk back on Nibiru, due to his rebellious nature. Instead, they left him here on Earth to do whatever he wanted. If he wanted to be the king of Earth, he could be their guest. But first, the gods nuked the Sinai spaceport to prevent Marduk access from it, due to his threats to take it over. Since then, Marduk has been in charge of this planet, or at least a majority of it. He is the force behind quite a substantial faction of what we call the global elite, the Illuminati, or the powers that be. It needs to be pointed out, though, that he is not the only one in charge. There are other interdimensional and dimensional forces, steering parts of the global elite in other directions as well, so the situation is complex. We will go into this in more details soon. Left on our planet since the gods abandoned it are both Enkites, Serpent Clan, and Enlilites, Ram Clan, and some of them are still loyal to the kingdom, the Nibiru kingdom, while Marduk obviously is not. So, the war between the two Nibiruan bloodlines is still going on here on Earth, and as usual, we humans are the soldiers. Not very uplifting reading for the young, courageous soldiers, who go to Iraq and other places to fight for freedom, when in fact, they fight the war of the gods, as almost always has been the case. This paper will cover the current Annunaki situation on Earth as we know it. 2. The Annunaki and their human hybrids, the global elite. The reader, who has followed me this far may wonder, if Marduk and his Annunaki stayed here on Earth and Marduk is still, after thousands of years, king of Earth, in that sense could perhaps been seen as the biblical Satan, left here to rule for another 3,600 years by God, Anu, Enlil, after been cast him down from heaven. Why all those wars? Can't he just rule all the nations with an iron fist and thus bring peace, although it's an oppressive peace? It's not that simple. Humans, also called Lulas, breed uncontrollably, and we are soon reaching the 7 billion mark. That's a lot of people to control, especially if you want to do it in secret. The decision to have 7 billion people on the planet at the same time is a divine decision, and nothing Marduk could do much about. What he does with the 7 billion, on the other hand, is another thing. When we look upon the power structure on planet Earth today as average human beings, we may feel small, insignificant and helpless. Even if we don't like how we live our lives, we may feel we are stuck within the system with no power to change it. Still, the Annunaki who are still on Earth do not exceed the amount of 300 plus individuals, compared with almost 7 billion humans. We know that these Annunaki beings are highly intelligent and advanced, at least technologically and intellectually, and they use a few thousand human hybrids, the global elite, to be their CEOs over Marduk's global empire. They are still in great minority, so they need to control us by some kind of very clever master plan. This is how it's done in general. The Annunaki keep themselves hidden and pull the strings from behind the scenes. The C.A.M.I. have always ruled from within councils, and the Council of 12 was the superior council while the Annunaki were here on Earth in larger quantities thousands of years ago. The original Council of 12 is no longer, according to a C.A.M.I. informant during Link meetings, the ruling council on Earth. However, in old Nibiruan tradition, Marduk, here on Earth, has set up his own Council of 12, which is now his own royal council. They use the purest hybrids on Earth, some of them being direct descendants of the old Annunaki lords in the ancient past. The purer your bloodline, the more power you are delegated. These hybrids are put in charge of politics, business, education, media, entertainment, banking and think tanks, to name a few. In other words, they are positioned where they can control the most people. With their money scam, the banking system, they are able to keep whole nations under their thumbs, and make people in general dependent on money for their survival. They use their ancient method of divide and conquer by something we call problem-reaction solution. When the global elite, through their alien masters, want a change in their structure, whether it's local or global, and they know people in general wouldn't agree to the changes, they create a problem big and traumatic enough for the population in general to cry for a solution. This is the reaction, and then the same people who created the problem in the first place now present the solution they wanted all the time. Out of fear and terror, people are now willing to accept the solution they wouldn't even consider before. A typical example is 9/11. The attack is the problem, they get a reaction from the people to do something about such horrible terrorist attacks, and the US government tightens the belts on us with harsher national security, allowing people to be monitored, stripped, controlled, restricted, creating new laws where it's easier to control the masses, and so on. This is happening on an almost daily basis. They are using fear as a weapon, and unfortunately, we humans fall for it almost every time. Of the 300 plus Annunaki who stayed on Earth, the majority of them, around 200, are loyal to Marduk and some are still loyal to the kingdom, Nibiru. So right there we have the same conflict again between the Enlilites, the Ram clan, the kingdom, and a faction of the Enkites, the Serpent clan, Marduk's loyal lords. So they are still using human soldiers as cannon fodder in their petty wars against each other in an attempt to win power over to their own side. Both sides are using the global elite members as their puppets. Wars are also a great way to keep the population from increasing in numbers too much, as well as man-made fatal diseases, viruses, vaccinations, prescription drugs, food and sweets that are poisonous to your body system, to name a few. The whole power structure on Earth is built like a pyramid, with the council on the top, the global elite purer hybrid power bloodlines right underneath, less pure hybrids under them, and under them, hand-picked humans who have the brains to be able to do the job and can be manipulated easily enough by promises of power and wealth. Most of the latter have no idea whom they are actually working for, everything is on a need-to-know basis to keep the truth away from people. With those regular people, or those of watered-down bloodlines put in important positions, blackmail is often a common way to keep them loyal to the cause. Very commonly, they are offered young, beautiful women, often underage girls or boys, to have sex with, without their wives knowing about it, and in the future, If they refuse to cooperate, their dirty laundry is hung out in public. Hence, the many suicides in high places, and high-level officials with their crimes being exposed in the media. The situation is further complicated, because factions of the global elite have signed contracts with other alien species, like the Greys, reptilians and the Verdants, more about these later, creating more civil unrest, conflicts and wars, making this whole planet a giant war zones, with the great majority of people having no idea what is going on. Most of these bonds were made through TTPs, technological transfer programs, where we got technology in exchange for what they wanted from us. In charge of the human global elite, the human hybrid parts of it, are the Rockefeller and the Rothschild banking families. They have been the visible rulers for a couple of millennia, but under different names. The Rothschilds were previously called the Bauers, for example. Both families are royal and go back to Old Sumer, and further. There are 11 other ruling elite families as well, whom also go back to the Annunaki. They are, according to researcher and writer, Fritz Springmeier. 1. Astor. 2. Bundy. 3. Collins. 4. DuPont. 5. Freeman. 6. Kennedy. 7. Lee, Chinese. 8. Onassis. 9. Rockefeller. 10. Rothschild. 11. Russell. 12. Vanden. 13. Merovingian, European royal families. The following families are also interconnected with those above. 1. Reynolds. 2. Disney. 3. Krupp. 4. McDonald. So what is the difference between regular people and those who are of the ruling elite, or connected to them by blood? First of all, many of them are descendants of the old Hebrews, and are therefore the Enlils, YHVHs/Jehovah's, chosen people in the Bible. They have been put near the top of the pyramid to rule over the rest of mankind. According to Sitchin's translations, they were not meant to rule us with an iron fist like they have over the last millennia, and kill us off and treat us like slaves and cannon fodder. The intention was apparently to govern us until we could manage by our own as a human species. We know that this never happened. They were immediately, under Marduk's command, drunk by power and wealth, and became the ruling elite we see today. They have no intention to set us free. But like I insinuated before, I don't think the intention ever was to let us rule the planet. The Hebrews, who were the Enlil's chosen people, were taken advantage of by Marduk, and bribed. So they simply changed side. This is my belief. What I find notable is that King Anu and the Enlil got these strange epiphanies from Galsu, the mysterious person, and right there realize that we are all one and humans need to get Earth to rule over themselves. So why, then, did they leave Marduk here, too rebellious to come back to Nibiru, knowing he would make a mess down on Earth? If they loved their children, as they apparently call us, would parents leave their kids with mass murderers? 2,000+ years have passed since they were here last and nuked the Sinai spaceport and Sodom and Gomorrah before they left. This means that they left between two Nibiru crossings, which is of some importance, because if they did, they can come back before 2060 to 2095. Their return doesn't have to exactly coincide with Nibiru. They know interstellar travel and can come through stargates and Einstein-Rosen bridges as they please. Still, it's probably in their interest to come after the cataclysm that will follow around the time for the crossing. However, one may think that if they have had 2,000 years to evolve, they potentially could have come a long way. But keep in mind that 2,000 years, 2/3 SAR, which is 2/3 of a year in their terms. They don't count time as we do. We may argue that they are also interdimensional and multidimensional, which would perhaps speed up their progress, but if we look back on their history, they haven't developed hardly at all the last 500,000 years. They have always been the same warrior race with bloodlines fighting against bloodlines, as above, so below. It's hard to believe that they suddenly, in no time at all, in their terms, have developed so amazingly fast, relatively speaking, that they are now mature enough to govern us peacefully. Dr. A.R. Borden is telling us they use nanotechnology to develop their biominds until they now have almost reached oneness. This is hypothetically possible, I assume, but it concerns me when I listen to Dr. Borden, and by the same token read the following from his essay, The Link. It is reported by members who have attended the conferences that they are near the completion of their cycle on oneness, wherein all knowledge and mind resources are used in service to the common. This, it was said, can only be possible when the diversity of biominds of each member remains in individuality while simultaneously being interconnected to the SID.A.me. All one by low-powered, low-energetic means that utilizes the planet's life belt energetics, something akin to what Earth enjoys in the form of Schumann resonance. There is yet much we don't quite understand about their system of oneness, as there are technologies used to enhance the common biomind that are beyond our level of technology at this time, emphasis not in original. However, we do now possess a theoretical understanding of how it all works. 3. Here he says there is much we still don't understand, but should we then accept that we don't understand and take the SID.A.M.I. suggestions to heart? How can we trust them? Let's pretend that you and I were a team and traveled around the world 10 years ago and killed people left and right and played silly, but vicious power games which we thought appropriate, raped women and minors, plundered and dedicated ourselves to the worst criminal acts, and then disappeared for 10 years. Suddenly, we come back and tell people that what happened 10 years ago was in the past, and we are clean now. Would anyone believe us? Would they have a reason to? No. They would need so much more proof than our words. The ETs can tell us anything they want us to believe. A.R. Borden told me their science group has developed BS detectors over the last 20-odd years, and that the ETs could maybe fool one or two of them, but not the whole group. I'd say, why not? It's easy to be arrogant about our own brilliance and think we can compare even our most brilliant minds with those of the more developed ETs. I believe that if they want to, these ETs can pass any BS detector we may be able to develop at this time, with the ease of a thought, and perhaps a laugh. I also have reason to believe that the other alien species that show up on the Link meetings are from the same confederation, just pretending they are not working together. You don't think aliens can be that sophisticated? We can, so of course they can. 3. ET disclosure projects and their two major advocates. The situation may seem totally hopeless, but believe it or not, there is still hope, and not all aliens are here to conquer and destroy. In fact, the large majority of ETs in near space are not hostile to humans, and many of them are here to help us in one way or the other. They are not here to interfere with armed forces, or to put themselves in charge. Most of them are working in the background and are observing. Sometimes I get emails from people saying that these peaceful ETs are not too much help if they just sit up there in spaceships somewhere without doing anything. First of all, that's not true. They are doing something, and we're getting into that soon, but most importantly, it's not for them to interfere or intervene. Most species are accustomed to following the law of one, which includes non-interference policies. More about the law of one later. We are living in a free will zone, and it's up to us as a biomind to work out our own problems. It's a part of learning, to go from adolescence to adulthood as a species, and we can't have things given to us on silver plates. We are the ones who need to consciously unite on a subquantum level, thought level, and find out what it is that we want as a humanity. This can't be done in institutions like the United Nations or others, presently existing on Earth, because these organizations are already controlled by those who are not working in our best interests. Under the Solutions section we will discuss different options we have as a species. One thing I want to emphasize already here is the dangerous mindset of people like Dr. Stephen Greer and his team, and Dr. Richard Boylan. The latter is more dangerous than the former. Both of them are embracing all ETs in Earth near space and tell us there are no bad ETs, they are all star brother and star sisters and should immediately be integrated with us, or we with them. They say the government knows about the aliens, which is true, and now it's time for a disclosure, meaning that the government should disclose the ET issue to the people. There are no bad or good ETs, of course, only different imperatives. What's a good imperative for one race may not be a good imperative for us, though. However, more often than not, imperatives can be combined and worked out to the best for two species. This doesn't mean, like Dr. Boylan says, that we should turn on our flashlights, metaphorically speaking, point them to the sky and shout, "Welcome all star visitors. Here we are." Dr. Boylan in particular is inviting both the Zeta Reticulian Greys, the Verdants, the Tall Whites, the Annunaki, respectively, without exceptions, calling them all-star visitors and good-hearted. Both Greer's team and Boylan agree that all the negative ETs have left near-Earth space and there are only positive ETs left. This is extremely naive, but not only that, it's dangerous and a liability for the rest of mankind. Not all ETs have our best interests in mind, as we shall see, but Dr. Boylan and Dr. Greer don't seem to care and are very aggressively making their point. If someone brings up that there are ETs with clashing imperatives with us, we are immediately put on Dr. Boylan's blacklist as being government agents, disinformation agents or worse. After I've published this, I'd be surprised if he doesn't put me on there too. Boylan and Greer are opening up a can of worms if they don't become more selective. It's like a channeler allowing any entities to come into their body. Dr. Greer is not any less aggressive than Dr. Boylan. When I suggested there may be those who don't have our best interest in mind, he, or his staff, rather, became very hostile and refused to discuss the matter and told me it is self-evident that all ETs are good and advised me to watch the Disclosure Project video again, from 2001. Greer is even calling one of his projects the Orion Project. One may wonder, why? Orion doesn't have a particularly good reputation here on Earth. Also, he has sponsors in high places, like within the Rockefeller family, and he's open with it. He justifies it by saying that branches of the banking, oil family are now ready for disclosure and support the North Carolina emergency doctor on his quest. Both Greer and Boylan have a huge amount of almost cultish followers, and this is the danger. I have been in contact with people who are otherwise very intelligent and spiritually aware, but like one of them said, when Dr. Boylan speaks, I'm all ears. This is concerning and quite discouraging in my opinion. We have to be more selective and mindful than that if we are going to make it. About a week ago, from this point in early September 2011, when I am editing this paper, Drive, Richard Boylan did a reading, and also had support from his star visitors, saying that a series of earthquakes were going to hit North Carolina and Virginia. He gave us the exact dates, times of the day, and said that many people would die at this juncture. He has allegedly about 1 million people on his list, so I'm sure at least a few of them are from these mentioned areas. I read it and shook my head in wonder. How can the man do this? Does he realize how much fear and terror he is creating? Did anyone leave their home, or sell it? Did they leave the target areas? Not for a moment did I think he would be correct. When, predictably enough, the first earthquake didn't happen, Dr. Boylan wrote a new email to the list, saying that the cabal had changed their minds. This was supposed to be a man-made earthquake, and decided to hold that one earthquake back and let the Virginia earthquake hit first just to make him and the star visitors look stupid. He said that now it had been changed to so-and-so time. I shook my head again in wonder. I asked myself, are people really listening to this guy? However, none of the two earthquakes happened, of course. Boylan then came back on the list, saying that the cabal had held both quakes back to build them up to 8.4 on the Richter scale or something of the sort, just to make them more potent. Still, they were going to happen on so-and-so date at so-and-so time. Nothing happened. Silence. Then Dr. Boylan came online again, after people had held their breaths in wait for this miracle man to come with his new predictions. This time he responded to a reader, who said that maybe they should do a mass prayer on the earthquakes. Boylan said no, because then the cabal would accuse them to create earthquakes. Then silence again. No earthquakes. Then someone on the list said that the earthquakes will happen, but not at this time, and Dr. Boylan responded with something unintelligible, and that was it. Nothing heard from Dr. Boylan since, and this was a few days ago. After all this clowning around, people on his list are still supporting him and thanking him for what he's doing. That's mind control when it's really effective. Dr. Boylan is looked upon by his member as a very nice, older man, who predicts earthquakes that never happen, scaring people shitless, excuse my language. Where were the benevolent star visitors when he needed them? Out to lunch? This information comes from Dr. Boylan's mailing list, Dr. Rich Boylan reports, between August 30th to September 8th, 2011. I would be happy to be on his bad list. If he would put me on his good list, I would have to go through my material with a tooth comb, because then I must be doing something wrong. This is very disturbing. Either Dr. Boylan is extremely gullible and easily manipulated, or he is working for the cabal he is so fast to blame for every mistake he makes. Oh, I almost forgot, Dr. Boylan thinks that Obama is a star visitor, too, and will be so kind to help Dr. Boylan out and disclose to the world that these wonderful star visitors are here. Doesn't all this create chills down your spine? It does mine. Just recently, President Obama told people they could ask him questions online, and Dr. Boylan advised his followers to do so, like if it would make any difference. I am stunned. But the most disturbing part is not Dr. Boylan himself, but those who are following him in spite of these catastrophic errors and contradictions. And his whole star visitor agenda is breathtaking. You see drawings of all these star visitors we know about, holding hands in friendship with cute smiles on their faces. Well, the thought is good, but don't tell us that all aliens out there, without discrimination, are saint-like, and we are ready to embrace them all. And don't put people who disagree with one word you're saying, Dr. Boylan, on some government disinformation blacklist. This is very counterproductive and outright dangerous. It also delays our mission, we who are working on revealing what is really happening. Don't get me wrong, most species out there are friendly towards us and have our best interests in mind, but they have not yet revealed themselves to us en masse for a purpose. And why is that? Because we have to overcome our greatest weaknesses first. We can't just chaotically stumble into the galactic community while fighting each other and being overly egotistical and ignorant, thus bringing our problems to their vicinity. We need to grow up first, and there are those who are patiently watching us doing just that. The only time they would interfere would be if we are literally destroying our planet, which we actually are close to doing. This is the living library, and there are those who would never let us go so far that we destroy their creation. They are also monitoring us and our nuclear activities and how we handle a negative energy, more about that later. These are very concerning matters for them. More than once, the ETs have stopped nuclear missiles from going off, something that has baffled military forces and even been mentioned in the media. We have Annunaki, Nephilim genes, and Homo sapiens sapiens was created by Yah, the biblical Lucifer, and this means we have a warrior stroke inside of us which we have to overcome and grow out of. I believe we are waking up to this fact, and the nanosecond, 1987 to 2012, when time is speeding up and the information is hitting us via gamma rays from the Sun and the galactic center, is strengthening our DNA and connecting the so-called junk DNA to our double helix to create a wiser, more peaceful Homo futurus. I am not overly convinced that disclosure is the medicine right now. On the other hand, it's a matter of what we mean by disclosure. There are so many good, intelligent people out there who are working hard on disclosure projects of different kinds, But we need to understand that the government, no matter what they say, are run by malevolent beings who don't have our best interest in mind. The disclosure supporters say that the government has come to a point where they have no choice but to tell the truth about the alien visitors, and that many people in the military would be relieved if everything would be disclosed, but if the government is disclosing the ET issue, it's going to be on their terms, and it's not going to be the truth. Disclosure will happen, but more on an individual basis at first. The benevolent ETs will not expose themselves through the government, whom they certainly do not trust. The only disclosure I would find valuable is to get more information from groups like LPGC and others who sit on info regarding different ET races, who they are, where they come from, their imperatives, and who is working together with whom. We need to categorize them and find out whom to trust and whom to stay away from. Anyone can show themselves off as saints, but behind the veil being very dark beings. Dr. Borden, just like me, is interested in intelligence gathering on different ET species to find out more about their relationship with each other, but he refuses to reveal what he knows about the group he belongs to. This is very unfortunate, in my opinion, because withholding this information could be potentially dangerous in the long run. Ed Komarek, known UFO researcher, made the comment why the Link group is so secretive if they have nothing to hide. Carol Rosen, Greer's right hand, said in an interview recently that she is absolutely certain there are no ETs with malevolent intents left in Earth near space. They have all left, including the Greys, the Guardians said, before this statement, that if anyone tells you the Greys are no longer here, watch out. Her rationale is that if they were here, they had already taken over or destroyed us, and obviously, we, meaning we humans, are still here. This, in my opinion, with all the information that is out there which she is discarding, is quite naive at best. 4. The exodus of the Annunaki earthbound. In the 1400 CE, King Anu of the Si.A.M.I. stepped down from the position as king of Nibiru. This, however, did not come as a surprise, but something the king had prepared for hundreds of years, in our terms. For political reasons, he was forced to, apparently. The lobbying during this time was apparently intense, and both clans, the Ram clan, the Enlil bloodlines, and the Serpent clan, the Enki's bloodlines, were as usual in competition for power, and both clans wanted to put their people on the throne. Anu, who wanted the transition to be as peaceful as possible for the Nibiruan people, tried to calm things down. He announced that his successor would be judged due to his performance down on Earth before the Sinai nuclear disaster. How do we know this? According to the Life Physics Group, LPGC, they come out of link meetings with these alien groups. These meetings have either taken place in exotic and secret places here on Earth, or on board one of their crafts. The human faction of this group has been organizing these meetings only twice. The story about Anu stepping down, and the rest of it, was told to them by the Nibiruan representatives at these same meetings to give a briefing to us Earthlings, so we can make more knowledge-based decisions in the future, so they said. In addition to this, the LPGC members are referring to witnesses, whom they call informants, with whom they spoke over a few years' time. What these informants said, supposedly independent from each other in most cases, can be read in A.R. Borden and J.W. Barber's Journal of End Time Studies Volume 1, January to June 2007, Between the Devil and the Incoming Rock. These witnesses are either scientists, ex-military, or ex-government agents on the middle and higher levels. And lastly, I have my own experiences with LPGC, from having been in contact with them for over 8 months as of this writing. They have shared a lot of inside information that will be released in increments, where parts of my own info is some of it. I've seen things unfold within the organizations and their struggles with coming to terms with the intel and information they have regarding the Si.A.M.I. and other present and future ET issues, and natural disasters. A few decades before the beginning of the Common Era, CE, The announcement that King Anu was stepping down was made. This resulted in a fast exodus of the Anunnaki still on Earth, and they immediately returned to Nibiru to be part of the lobbying. Both Namor and Ea, now calling himself Ankur, left Earth to be with their father on the home planet. Ankur's sons, Marduk and Ninishzida, and their families went back as well, causing the closure of the smelting operations in Bolivia. Others that returned were reportedly Nergal, Ankur's son, and his consort, Namor's granddaughter Ereshkigal, King Anu's grandson Ninurta and consort. Other Anunnaki, members of the Ram clan who returned were Nannar and his wife were, Iskur, Inanna, Asnan, Nance, and a few more. Nannar, so we're told, and his consort did return to Earth for a short time after that, to northern Syria, only to return to the platform to wait for transport to the home planet. Then, in the later part of the 2nd century CE, Nannar was instructed by his father and King Anu to return to Altiplano of southeastern Peru, to help Nannar's son Uti with closing down the smelters of Sacsayhuaman and stop the runway operations in the Nazca area of southern Peru. The smelters continued to process gold, tin and silver for a while, managed remotely from Turkey, but by the 6th century, Sacsayhuaman was no longer in use and the pre-Incan civilizations from northern Peru through the north of the Atacama Desert in northern Chile were left to fend for themselves. The Anunnaki were gone. Other colonies, to cite Dr. Borden again. Like North American Midwest, Southeastern and Southwestern native groups who came in contact with and taught by the Anunnaki how to manage agriculture, animal husbandry, and other basic matters, were also abandoned by the Anunnaki by the 7th and 8th centuries CE. For a couple of hundred years, we humans were more or less left alone on the planet for the first time since the Anunnaki created Homo sapiens sapiens, about 300,000 years ago. But they would return. 5. The announcement of the new king. The transition between King Anu stepping down and the announcement of the new king over the kingdom, Nibiru, was a slow one and took about 600 years. Anu was very careful with whom he chose as his successor, because reportedly, he wanted the new king to be a person who once again could unite the Sa.A.Me, the Nibiruans, and stop the feud between the clans. Knowing how strong the polarity between the clans were, it was certainly not an easy task. For a while, he wanted to choose Ankur, Ea, but he knew he couldn't, because he was not the legal heir of the throne, according to Nibiruan law, and that would upset the Ram clan and only add fuel to the fire. As mentioned earlier, Anu also took into consideration the performance of certain royal candidates while on Earth, and didn't really find a proper candidate, as most of them had been involved in raging wars and disasters. No one seemed to have a clean resume. As a side note, I find it remarkable how King Anu could be so judgmental, when he was the one who, according to Sitchin, allowed Alalu's nuclear missiles to fall over the Sinai spaceport and Sodom and Gomorrah, knowing that thousands of Earthlings would die horrible deaths and parts of the planet become radioactive for thousands of years. This speaks tons about the morals and ethics of this species, or the lack thereof, from our perspective. Too many destructive actions and decisions makes a person blind. We can argue that they have other imperatives than we do, and look at us as ants or unintelligent apes, but I don't think that justifies the cruel actions taken against us humans in the past. And aside from that, we need to think about our own imperatives in relation to this group of aliens, whom obviously think they own us because they manipulated our genes. They were never our creators, they were imposters who manipulated an already highly developed DNA/RNA. However, we will discuss this a little bit later on. When the Exodus happened in the 6th-8th century CE, there were about 400 Anunnaki on our planet, and 3/4 of them were supporting Marduk, obeying him as their king of Earth or the Nibiru kingdom, and were not recognizing King Anu as their king. This was a big problem for the real kingdom, and Marduk had always been, and still was, a time bomb and a great concern. None of Marduk's followers could of course be considered as King Anu's successor. Eventually, Ninishzida came up with a solution. He suggested Nannar, the Enlil's son. He reasoned that Nannar was the only one who could really succeed in uniting the Sa.A.Me. Again, and additionally, Ninishzida said that Nannar had the vital force of his grandfather, King Annu himself. Ninishzida had actually himself been considered by King Annu as his successor, but politely declined, again saying that Nannar would be the better choice. After a lot of pondering, Annu agreed, and Nannar, son of Namar, the Enlil, and grandson of Annu, became the king of Nibiru in the 1400 CE. After hundreds of thousands of years, at least, King Annu stepped down from the throne. He was apparently happy that the transition could be done without bloodshed. From our point of view, the leadership had been changed from the Serpent clan, Ea's bloodline, to the Ram clan, the Enlil's bloodline. Metaphorically, that would be a shift from the Democrats to the Republicans. 6. Marduk returns to Earth. We know from face-to-face and mind-to-mind communications between members of the LPGC and those from the kingdom, Nibiru, that Marduk left Earth by the 8th century CE, but what happened next? Marduk, obviously, was not wanted on Nibiru and was not allowed to stay there. In 2001, the LPGC was informed that Marduk and approximately 300 Annunaki returned to Earth again around the turn of the millennium, 1000 CE, and has been here ever since, some of them taking control over the Earth population by force and by creating his own pyramid power structure, with Marduk placing himself on top as the only god and king of the universe. Marduk easily fits the picture as the biblical Satan, if we are to believe Sitchin's story, and also fits right into the biblical prophecies, such as the Book of Revelation and the Book of Daniel, and him and Satan seem to be one and the same. He also took control over all major religions to use in efforts to manipulate the growing Earth population and to divide and conquer. The first thing he did was an attempt to rewrite history to erase all the knowledge humans had of their own history and origins, putting himself in the position as God Almighty. He even took on the task to rewrite the Babylonian Enuma Elish, Sitchin 1985. He is still worshipped as God in many secret societies, such as the Freemasons, unbeknownst by most members, except those few at the very top level, above the 33rd degree, Scottish Rite. Marduk is the all-seeing eye on top of the Freemasonic pyramid, and the Eye of Ra, Marduk Ra, whom later became Amen-Ra when he was in hiding after the pyramid incident, previously covered in Annunaki paper number 3, After the Deluge, Penner 2011, and my previous book, The Myth Around Supreme David Rockefeller. More about Supreme later as well. Marduk changing history to give himself more power is mentioned both by Zechariah Sitchin in his Earth Chronicles, Robert Morning Sky's The Terra Papers, which go into even more details about it, and comes from the Sa.A.M.I. themselves, through conversations during the annual link meetings between ET groups and the LPGC, as mentioned earlier. By rewriting history and secret and occult instruction manuals, he could convert all these secret groups, secret societies, into intelligence cells working for him, and thus be ahead of those who opposed him. Presently, he is also attempting to reconstruct a 6-stage ziggurat strong enough to support a landing platform at its apex. This, becoming his new spaceport instead of the Tilmun, Sinai spaceport, that was nuked by the Sa.A.M.I. and the fallen ones before they left a couple of millennia prior to the Common Era. It's easy to see how Marduk, in an almost childish revolt and rebellion towards his own people for not giving him the power he deserved in the first place, from his perspective, not only created, and still does, havoc here on Earth, but is also magnifying the ancient struggle between the two clans. The Ram clan of course doesn't accept his behavior, and he also puts his father, Ankur, Ea, in an almost impossible position. Ankur wants to support his son, but has to be as diplomatic as he possibly can. A wrong move or a wrong word can potentially start another war. The situation, from what I can imagine, is quite tense. After all, Ankur is the one who has felt the most compassion towards mankind, much due to that he looks upon us as his own creation, his own children. It was his sperm which created the first Annunaki, human hybrids. Ankur, sitting on the original Earthly Council of 12, whom decided about big issues and problems that needed to be solved here on Earth, had many times supported his son, or protected him from the rest of the council. Now, however, when both Namor and Ankur have left Earth, Marduk has set up his own council, in the Wingmaker's mythology called the Kordam, with himself on top with the rank of 60, something that is reserved for the king of Nibiru, only. By giving himself this rank, Marduk announces himself being both king of Earth, Satan, and that of Nibiru, thus not acknowledging the sitting king and the kingdom. By giving himself the rank of king, and his refusal to give his obedience to the kingdom in general, made the Nibiruan council decide to put Marduk in the equivalent to quarantine here on Earth. What this means, exactly, is not known to me, and I haven't yet been able to find out. Does it mean that Marduk is not allowed to leave Earth, which has been vaguely indicated to me, or is the picture bigger than that, something to the effect of what Robert Morning Sky wrote in the Terra Papers? According to Morning Sky's research, and from what the Star Elder told him, the whole Earth was put under quarantine, and humans, too, are not allowed or able to travel very far out in space. The Pleiadians, on the other hand, just like David are talking about a frequency quarantine, as mentioned earlier, where our DNA was tampered with to the extent that we have been stuck in this 3D frequency range for pretty much 300,000 years. A similar thing is brought up in the raw material, where the raw people are telling us we are put under quarantine by the Council of Saturn, which pretty neatly corresponds to the Nibiruan Council. This whole quarantine issue is going to be discussed in another paper as well, but it seems plausible that quarantine can mean different things here. It is clear that Marduk has a strong hold over most institutions, banking cartels, educational systems, religions, entertainment etc., in the world of today. However, he does not have the monopoly many researchers think. Besides the two factions of Annunaki, fighting each other, the Ram clan and the Serpent clan, there are at least 2 or 3 other major ET races competing over total control of Earth and mankind. This makes things even more complicated, and we will discuss all these challenges in separate papers, but we'll concentrate on Marduk for now.